Hey everyone, Jag Taggart 93 here with another vlog. Hope everyone out there had a lovely Thanksgiving, and for all those stuck jockeying a register during Black Friday, or anyone pushing a cart hoping to get some gifts for their loved ones, please be safe and courteous. Now I thought this weekend, instead of doing another WOD or Quake map review, I'd reminisce for a bit about my first job at KB Toy Works. I worked there for about 4 years, and I was there for a few hectic Black Fridays back in the day. Now I was there for the PS2 launch, and even there later for the Xbox and GameCube launches. I learned a lot about my fellow humans during my first foray into retail that, overall, I think had a positive impact on my people skills. Now, I'm not saying that working there wasn't, at times, the drizzling shits. It definitely was. However, I'm a firm believer in jobs like this that they help people learn and develop social skills. You see, before I was hired, I was a super quiet, socially anxious individual. I legitimately trembled at the thought of going anywhere, like a supermarket or store, by myself. I also had a tendency to overthink what people thought of me when they were talking to me. Yeah, I had a real problem with managing social anxiety that resulted in me often giving monosyllabic, one-word answers to everything. Someone asked, "How are you doing?" and I would just say, "Good." Anything going on? No. And that came across as a bit rude. I see that now in hindsight, but at the time, that's just how I was. Um, well, fortunately, the managerial staff at this KB Toy Works saw potential in me anyway, and took me on as a seasonal employee just prior to the big PlayStation 2 holiday season. As one of the managers told me some years later, the reason why they took a chance on me was that I was the only one who knew the slightest bit about video games, and they banked heavily on that for me to push their electronics that season. They also knew that with practice and some coaching, I'd become better at talking to complete strangers and become a big asset to the store. Now, for those first few months, looking back, I made a lot of mistakes. Mistakes that, at most other retail stores, especially now, especially at a place like GameStop, would have probably had me terminated or my hours, severely cut. Now, I remember my first day there, I took it upon myself to reorganize all of the video game displays in the glass display case, and I made sure to showcase games that I felt were good, and I hid all the games that I knew were terrible. In my heart of hearts, I generally thought I was doing the store a massive service by showcasing all the really good products over all the crap shovelware and third-party merchandise that was kind of chintzy shovelware that they had. So I was really shocked when I came in the next day and one of my assistant managers greeted me with a stern, "The hell did you do last night? It's a complete mess." Now I had no idea what he was talking about and asked what he meant. He then proceeded to show me our planogram for the store and how every game we have is meant to be displayed according to it. Now I honestly had no idea about this, and he admitted I probably should have been shown that before I was tossed up there behind the video game counter on my first day. Also, he did appreciate that there was a method to what he perceived to be a disorganized mess, and that I had the best of intentions. Now, it's moments like that that made me truly grateful for this job, looking back. Now, if I was sacked right then, or had my hours cut, or if I was relocated, I probably would not have learned my lesson. Instead, I was shown my mistake and coached with encouragement. You see, the primary goal all along, I was told, was to provide outstanding customer service. As long as I was doing that, then all could be fixed or remedied. So I did my best. I remember one parent came in a few weeks later and asked me to recommend a Nintendo 64 game for her son. She was thinking about getting Superman 64, but didn't like how it was only single player. So, being wise to gaming at the time, I knew Superman 64 was not only a single player game, but it was also complete dog shit. So, I instead recommended Super Smash Bros. Now, at first, she wasn't really sure about this. I remember she was a little put off by the name, Super Smash Bros., but I explained to her that the action and violence in this extremely cartoony game was very kid-friendly, and it's loaded with characters that her son would probably recognize. Also, it was compatible with up to 4 players, and I think that was the big selling point for her, along with my assurance that it was kid-friendly. Now, as I explained the game to her, I see that she was starting to come around, and I remember taking a moment to listen to myself as I was talking, and marveling at how I was actually having a conversation with a complete stranger, and not only that, but actually doing a good job at persuading them. So she eventually agreed and purchased Super Smash Bros. Instead for her son. And yeah, I like to think that I actually genuinely did save someone's childhood out there. Feels real good, actually. Now, that's not to say my social skills and social anxiety were cured that quickly. Oh, no, no, no. Soon it was Black Friday, and I vividly remember feeling absolutely mortified every time I had to tell someone we were out of PlayStation 2s. That was that season's big seller. What's more, I was the only one behind the counter on that Black Friday morning until about noon and early afternoon. So, yeah, I was drawing all of the aggro and all of the angst from every single mom, dad, and granny in the store. I was getting so anxious that, while sliding open the large glass display case behind me, I guess I must have opened it too quickly and caused a small piece of it to crack and chip off, and actually cut my hand in the process. Now, I knew there were band aids and a first aid kit in the back room, but that was all the way across the store. And again, I was the only one at the counter right now until I can be relieved for break, so I felt really stuck. I must have had about 20, maybe 25 people crowding around my desk waiting for their turn, but it might as well have been 1,000 for how rattled I felt. So I turned, pretending I was getting a game for a customer, and covertly, with my back turned to everyone, placed a piece of register tape over the bleeding cut on my palm and wrapped it up with scotch tape, and then I quickly stuck that hand into my pocket. I then proceeded to do the rest of my job one-handed until I was finally relieved for my lunch break. As I was making like Solid Snake to the break room in an attempt to not get noticed by customers, with my bleeding hand in my pocket, I remember witnessing two older ladies in a furious fight over a Tickle Me Elmo. One of the ladies was wailing on the other with a large garbage bag of toys, while the other was trying to ram her repeatedly with her cart. Now, as I sat in the break room and replaced my makeshift cashier's bandage with the real deal, a couple band-aids, I thought for a moment about how appreciative I was for my own parents. Um, I was recalling what I saw earlier on my way back there, and they have to go through this kind of madness every year for me and my siblings. Was Black Friday always this terrible? Um, Despite the craziness, I didn't quit. That was my very first Black Friday, and I remember that the holiday rush didn't die down that season. It kept going pretty strong until late December. During this time, whatever seemed like it could go wrong often did. Registers, check machines, and credit machines often failed, and the CD of holiday jingles we played over the store PA system loved to incessantly skip at that one song, "What Do You Get a Wookiee for Christmas?" If you don't know what I'm talking about, "What Do You Get a Wookiee for Christmas?" Do not look it up. It's maddening, especially when it keeps skipping again and again and again, and someone has to get free from a customer so they can run all the way back and change the track or change the CD. Happened repeatedly, really annoying. We only had one other CD, and that was for fall and our fall playlist. And we'd put that on instead, but then a manager would always say, "No, you got to play the Christmas music because someone from corporate comes in, and here's our fall album will be in the shits." So we put that in again until it eventually got to "What Do You Get a Wookiee for Christmas?" And then, yeah. Anyway, as this was going on, I remember the customers were getting more and more angry and more pushy for the PlayStation 2. I was actually getting death threats. Now, this was the first year of a 14-year career in retail. Okay, I shouldn't really say career, more like stint, but it was a really long stint. I was in retail for 14 years. And death threats around the holidays were admittedly kind of commonplace. Uh, I got them, but everyone did. Now, eventually I got used to them and would laugh them off, or if I perceived that they were a threat, I would calmly call the police or at least call security or asset protection. However, being a 16-year-old socially awkward teenager at the time, I did not have that kind of poise or confidence yet. So one time I remember I got so overwhelmed that I curled up in the cabinets underneath the glass display case, and I hid inside for close to a half hour. So my coworkers at this time had no idea where I was, and none of the customers saw me actually duck in there. I ducked in when it was briefly quiet for a second. One of the managers had to run up to the desk and cover for me. He quickly found out where I was, though, when he opened one of the cabinets, and to his shock, had my hand come up underneath and hand him the game he was looking for. Now, the typical punishment for doing something like this, okay, maybe not quite like this, but typical punishment if you were caught goofing off or whatever, besides the normal write-up, was to unbox and stick our merchandise in the back and prep it in the carts for the floor team to put away on the sales floor. Now, it was very tedious work, but it was work that I actually enjoyed since it involved very little interaction with customers. So, yeah, the thing was, this manager knew that I would like that. So, my punishment instead was to be the holiday greeter for the first 2 hours of every single shift for the rest of that December. Now, at the time, I thought this was cruel and inhumane punishment and so on, but looking back, I can kind of laugh a bit at it. And I do remember, too, as I was up there, the first few customers, I would just stand there awkwardly, not say anything, and just feel awkward because I wasn't saying anything. Eventually, I would croak out a hi or how are you, and over time, I realized that I became more comfortable the more I would speak. It was more awkward if I avoided speaking. And the irony is, I avoided speaking because I didn't want to appear awkward, not realizing how awkward it was just to not say anything at all. So, yeah. So as December wore on, we continued to be very busy, but it was very slowly petering out until Christmas Eve, where we were actually surprisingly quiet. Now, during my break that Christmas Eve, my manager called me over to a lone cardboard box all the way in the back, and he looked at me and said, "Man, I can't believe these idiots left us here." I looked inside the cardboard box, my jaw hit the floor. There were three new, pristine PlayStation 2s that had not been put out yet onto the sales floor that I guess we somehow missed. Now, I felt like an absolute ass. All those weeks of telling people we were out of this product, this hot to get item that season, and turns out we weren't. I mean, granted, it isn't like we had shelves and shelves of them, but still, 3 units is 3 units. That's, some good money for the store and at least a small handful of happy customers. So I grabbed the cart, put a closed cardboard box into it. I closed it back up and hurried to the sales floor. I was kind of worried that I'm not sure how rational it is looking back on it, but I remember genuinely believing that if a customer saw me walking to the sales floor, they might jump me for the units, or even worse, and this is probably more possible, a customer might ask me for help. I might get distracted, turn my back to help the customer, and someone might grab a PlayStation 2 out of the cart and run off. So, again, I had to be very sneaky on my way back up there. So, I made it back up to the sales floor and up to the video game display case, and I put the units away in the case, in the cabinets. So some time went by, and a gentleman came in to the store. He asked how I was doing, which alone took me aback. Usually, um, when customers ask, "Hey, how are you doing?" they'll immediately proceed with their question. They're just saying, "Hey, how you doing?" as a way of greeting. I remember this gentleman actually asked how you're doing and paused and waited for me to respond. I don't really quite remember what I said. I think I probably just said I'm fine or whatever, but I do remember how that surprised me. This person was coming across as a human being. But so I asked how he was, again, just being courteous, and that's usually what people do, as I realized. When you ask how you're doing and you explain it, you ask the same. So I asked how he was doing, and he proceeded to explain how badly his kid was asking for a PlayStation 2, and how much he was kicking himself because he was working 2 long shifts or working 2 shifts at 2 different jobs, um, first shift and second shift at one job, and I think it was like a third shift at another. So he had really had no time to go out and get one of these PlayStations until today. It was Christmas Eve, and I guess he had off from both of these jobs. He explained that he really doubted that we had any, but thought, shot in the dark, he'd ask anyway, and more likely, if it was possible, we can put him on some kind of call list to call him when they would finally arrive, and he'll just let his son know, Christmas, that they'll have him within a month or so, hopefully. Now, as he was telling me this, my face was lighting up. This is really what I needed. After weeks and weeks and weeks of being made to feel like a bad guy for not having the hot item that everyone wanted, I now had it. And what's more, the customer that was asking for it was actually not a dick, but someone that, again, came across like a genuine human being. Even though our interaction was strictly commercial and impersonal, I genuinely wanted to help him, and felt good that I could, so I couldn't be any happier for him, as I took out one of the units from underneath the cabinet and recommended Tekken Tag Tournament, which was one of the very few PS2 launch titles that we had that didn't suck complete balls. No, seriously, a lot of the early PS2 games were not that great, but Tekken Tag was pretty okay. And again, this father was elated, and I'd like to think his son had a very awesome Christmas too. And I was really happy to help out someone who was so hardworking and so nice. So Yeah, that is my Black Friday holiday story. I have many of them, and I'll probably save those for upcoming Christmases or I don't know, maybe down the road. But yeah, again, I hope all my sisters and brothers behind those registers this season stay safe and stay sane, as well as all those shoppers out there. Please enjoy this time for what it is, and happy holidays, and I hope you all have a Merry Christmas as well. Thank you all for listening. This is Jag Taggart 93 signing out. Have a good one.